This is honestly the last thing I thought I'd be saying about this arc, but Rob Lucci just might have earned my respect. Not only did he manage to stay standing after taking that massive blow from Zoro in the last chapter, but the amount of concern he shows for Kaku while talking to Mars is something I only thought he had for Hattori. I always imagined when it came to his partners in CP9 and then later on in CP0 that he saw them the same way that Vegeta saw Nappa. Nice to have him around, useful for missions, but he was ready to drop them at any second if they got in the way of his goal. But him pleading with Mars to try and spare Kaku's life has definitely made me see him in a whole new light. Like, don't get me wrong, still a complete and total piece of shit, but at least he does generally care for his allies, which probably made hearing Mars' response even more devastating. And keep in mind, this is from the official translation. One does not attempt to step on insects, it simply happens. Tragic. Imagine going through the amount of effort Lucci has throughout this entire arc and giving as detailed of a breakdown of the current situation as he did to your boss, only to have your one and only request be basically brushed over like you didn't even say it. And it's not like Mars couldn't do it if he wanted, because seemingly they still plan on taking York with them, who is apparently still tied up in the exact same room that Kaku's in. All he has to do is pick Kaku up when he grabs York and then fly the two out of there. Hell, he doesn't even have to do that because they should be the only two still in that room, unless Nami and the gang left an extremely injured Stussy just lying there to bleed out, which is very unlikely because Chopper was there with them, and he would at least have patched her up before leaving, so she more than likely isn't there anymore. So the only two who should still be in that room are York and Kaku, which means that Mars would have to go out of his way to purposely unalive Kaku, which honestly, he might do. But that being said, regardless of if Mars decides to take out Kaku or not, at least we can say Lucci tried to save him, which again is more than I thought he'd do. So yeah, the big cat's earned my respect, and I think he might have earned Zoro's as well. I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but to me it seemed like the reason why he was so reluctant to lead that fight was because that hit from the last chapter was intended to take Lucci down, but he was still standing, which probably impressed Zoro enough to want to continue to fight, but again, maybe I'm just reading too much into it. Now, speaking of Zoro, him and Jinbei do see Mars as they're heading toward Nami's gang. In fact, Jinbei saw him on his way to pick up Zoro, and that's the reason why he decided to cut their fight short and not give Zoro the chance to finish Lucci off. And I know everyone expects that before we leave Egghead, we have to see Zoro fighting against Venus because he's also a swordsman, but they're on two completely different parts of the island, and right now the main threat for the Straw Hats still in the labo phase is Mars. So if anyone, more than likely we'll see Zoro fight him for a bit. And not just him, more than likely we'll see Jinbei jump in too due to Zoro being so worn out from his fight against Lucci, which really hurts my soul to say that. But this all depends on if Mars even bothers to go after the Straw Hats, because right now his main goal is to stop the broadcast, which he tried to find out from York where it's being streamed from in the lab, but she's too freaked out by his yokai form to give him an exact answer. Which, I mean, yeah, if a giant demon bird came out of nowhere and started talking to me, I'd kind of lose my shit too. But yeah, I think him dealing with York and trying to stop the broadcast is going to be enough of a distraction for Mars that we won't have to worry about him attacking the Straw Hats and satellites that are still up there. So they should be able to make their way safely to the giant ship. And yeah, as of this chapter, that is now the main goal for the Giants, the Straw Hats, and the Vegapunks. No more fighting, simply just escaping the island, which might be harder than I originally thought, because for one, Luffy, Dory, and Broggy still had to contend with 3 members of the Gorosei that are currently hunting them down, more on that in a moment. And in a much more pressing matter, I was completely wrong about Bonnie's group in the last chapter, because despite looking like they were already at the ship, we found out in this one that they were still on their way to it. And by the time they finally got there, 3 Vice Admirals were waiting for them. Now, I don't think that the Vice Admirals will end up being a real threat. I'm pretty sure that Frankie and the Giant carrying them will be more than enough to handle the 3 of them, with maybe Red King being somewhat of a hassle just because he's a brand new introduced character. But the main problem is going to be that they're a distraction, stalling this group from getting on board the ship, because the way it's being presented, getting on the ship equals complete safety. Nothing can touch them once they're on board, so the longer it takes them to get on, the more danger they're in. And the reason why this is a problem is because we have 2 separate threats heading straight towards them. We have Doll and Bluegrass, who we already knew were on their way, and with Bluegrass's ability that might hinder their escape with her getting on board the ship and taking control of it. And much more importantly, Venus most likely knows that Bonnie is the key to regaining control over the Pacifistas, so more than likely he's on his way as well, and with this current group, it's very unlikely that they'd be able to take him on. I mean, there's a small chance that maybe Bonnie, now being inspired by Luffy, could use the Story of the Future to hold him off, but it's unlikely that as she is right now, she'd be able to take him on in a one-on-one fight. Which means, if I'm right, this is where we'll unfortunately see Kuma's story finally come to an end, sacrificing himself one last time to make sure that his daughter can safely get away. which will end up being very sad, but I don't expect it to happen until we're basically done with the arc. So at least we'll have hopefully a few chapters before we have to deal with those emotions, which I'm pretty sure when we get that final goodbye scene between the two of them, I'm going to end up crying like a baby. Actually, I might end up crying twice, once when I read it in the manga, and then one more time when the anime eventually catches up. If the anime staff does their job and actually hits that scene correctly, I guarantee you that when I watch it, I'm going to be crying my eyes out. I don't have any funny or witty transition to this, but we're going to jump back into talking about Luffy and the Giants real quick, because this chapter sort of confirmed what I was thinking in terms of where Dory and Broggy sit power-wise in this fight, because I've seen a lot of discussion online of people thinking the two would be completely outclassed by the Gorosei. Personally, I figured they were about where we see them in this and the last chapter. The elders are strong, but rely heavily on their healing factors, similar to Wolverine or Deadpool from Marvel Comics, and the two giant captains together are just about even, if not a little more powerful than one individual elder, but they most likely lose in a 1v1 fight. I mean, hell, they probably still lose in a drawn-out battle of the two of them against one member of the Gorosei, because again, overpowered healing, but that would be due to exhaustion and not power. Anyway, after blocking an attack from Mercury, who despite completely disappearing in the last chapter, was basically the MVP of this one, they just decide to book it back to their ship. Saturn tries to stop them by spitting poison balls at them, which I believe this is the first time we've seen him use this ability, despite Luffy somehow recognizing it and knowing they're poisonous. But Luffy turns a tree into a bat and hits a home run right back at them. Now, what's really interesting is that despite how old Dory and Broggy are, and the giant race as a whole, they say they've never heard of creatures like this before, which is leading a bit more credit to the idea that the Gorosei's powers aren't devil fruits, but more something completely new. But it's still going to be a while before we get any definitive answer from that. I'm guessing that once we get to Elbaf, we'll learn more about Joy Boy, and then maybe Dory and Broggy might not be aware of it, but when we talk to Prince Loki, maybe we'll have some information on what the Gorosei are, and possibly even what Emo is. And it could very well be that this is the information that we're actually going to see Vegapunk reveal once the time limit's up. But anyway, with the three captains on the run from the yokai and heading back to the ship, this fight is basically over. But the Gorosei still could catch up to them and try to once again take them out. Lucky for Luffy though, despite waking up like 10 chapters ago, probably even more than that if I'm actually misremembering, the ancient giant robot has finally made it to the surface, and it seems to have some regret concerning Joy Boy, which will most likely get explained in a short flashback or something over the next few chapters, or at least I hope it will. Hopefully Oda won't just completely overwrite this entire storyline of the giant robot and its connection to Joy Boy, just to have him do something cool against the Gorosei and then never see him again. Like, I want to believe that Oda will dive more into details about what the giant's connection to Joy Boy is in this arc, but it wouldn't surprise me if he saves that for when we get to Elbaf and after the giant robot's already been taken care of. I'm just hoping that if we don't end up getting a flashback or something that shows the connection of the giant to Joy Boy, which now that I think about it, we probably won't, just because it's probably too early for Oda to reveal what the original Joy Boy looked like. But if we don't end up getting that, hopefully this fight between it and the Gorosei is cool enough to justify how long we had to wait for it to finally show up. Other than that, Kizaru officially retired from this mission, using his wounds as an excuse, which I'm kind of personally on board with that decision, because he's been through almost as much emotional torment this arc as Bonnie has, so yeah, he's kind of earned his rest. Sanji's still making his way carrying a mostly dead Vegapunk. I'm not sure if at any point he's ever going to realize the Vegapunk's probably already not here. Still no word on Caribou, but again, I doubt we'll see what happened to him until the end of the arc. And of course, as you guys already know, One Piece will be on a 3-week break following this chapter, which obviously sucks, but will give us some time to go over a bunch of theories about what's coming next in this current arc and the next one. So let me know what your theories are down below. Thank you all for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll catch you all in the next one.